Hello everybody. Let's get right to this. This is a Gen2 Fortitude, and what we're going to do today is improve the trigger by replacing it with our Baker Airguns Benjamin Discovery Maximus 2260 and Fortitude trigger. This is all basically the Discovery trigger group, or the 2260 trigger group, and it has common parts. And that means that this, what we call the Baker Airguns, you know, the big name I just gave you there, our upgraded Benjamin Discovery trigger, basically. This is the kit. This will go right into any of those rifles and improve the trigger pull immensely. Now, this is the kit you can buy from us, $29.99, comes with everything you see. Brass trigger, redesigned pad, the 2 screws for the adjustment, and a new sear spring. And it comes with these instructions, these printed instructions. But this video is going to be an explanation on how to do this and a few little tips and things. Now, first things first, let's test this stock trigger. Now, this is a 177 Fortitude. I just pulled it out of the box, cleaned it, degassed it, and we're going to use it for this demonstration. Now, forgive me for cocking this rifle out of your view, but, okay, I've cocked the rifle. It's now ready to fire. And let's fire up the trigger pull gauge. Okay. .83 pounds, or 5 pounds 8 ounces. Let's do that again. And do pay attention to the amount of travel, or what we would call creep, in this trigger. Ready? I'm going to start pulling now. See how far it moves? That was 5 pounds 10 ounces. I won't bother doing 3, but you get the idea. It's up over 5.5 pounds. And that's about average for what we're seeing on these. And we're gonna fix that. Both the pull length and the pull weight will be reduced greatly, and there will be an over travel stop as well. Now, you don't need a lot to do this. You need a pick of some sort. See the little tip on there? You need something like that, kind of a pick of some sort. We need a large number 2 or 3 Phillips head screwdriver. You need a average smallish sized flathead screwdriver. You need a 1/32 inch Allen wrench. That might be the hardest tool to find, but they're available in most Allen wrench kits. And we need super lube. We need some grease. The best triggers I see on any of my expensive rifles, they all come with grease all over the trigger components. And every trigger job I do, I use grease. So let that be known. Don't be afraid to grease up your trigger components. Those are metal pieces moving against one another. Okay, so the disassembly of this rifle is fairly easy. You only need these tools I've showed you. We're going to start by removing the crossbolt safety right here. Now, if you look inside the trigger guard, I'm going to use this as my pointer, but on this side of the trigger, there's this slot right there. You see that slot? Inside that slot, right there, that little dot of silver pointing at you is the end of the spring that is pushing against, in this direction, against this safety to hold it in place. And to get it out is very simple. Now, if you notice, there's a big and a small side to this safety. If you do this with the big side pointed down, the safety will just drop right out, so be careful. I do it the other way with the big side up. But anyway, we just take our little hook and we hook our spring right there, and then we pull it that way. See how the safety fell? Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once here. Too many hands. But anyway, I'm going to pull this spring and then push this safety up out of there. Now it's out of its little home, and I have the spring pressure just holding it in there, and now you can just pull it right out. And that's how you don't lose it. So now we move to the single retaining screw that holds the stock to the action. And that's where we'll need our 2 or 3 Phillips head screwdriver. You simply remove that. There she goes. And now, as you can see, my rifle is degassed. I suggest you degas your rifle anytime you take it apart. But anyway, now the stock kind of pops off of here. I'm going to have to take it off camera, use 2 hands, but it just sort of pops in and out of the stock. Okay. So here we are at the guts, the bread and butter of the gun. Of course, this should have been safety checked before you started. Mine was. But this is the last chance. If you haven't done that, do it now. Although, like I said, you should have done it before you started. But anyway, if you look at what we have here, you will see that this is essentially a big plate that is held on with this screw and this screw. We simply remove these screws to expose the guts of the trigger group. And I will warn you, keep some pressure on this plate just to keep everything in place. It's always a good idea, anytime there's a spring involved, to take precautionary steps, whether they're really necessary or not, because once you lose that spring, you're going to be calling me up here at Baker Airguns, Donnie, do you have this spring for this gun? I'm going to be like, no. And you're going to be like, oh man. Maybe not exactly like that, but do be careful with the springs. And there we are. Now, carefully remove the plate. See how everything kind of popped up there? That's why you keep the pressure on there. Now don't be afraid if everything falls apart. I'll show you how to work it. But there we are. That's what's inside there. If you notice, there are some holes all over this, and they correspond to these pins that you see here holding the components in place. These pins do move. So don't be afraid, don't be scared, but if, say, this pin falls out, it's not the end of the world. Just don't lose it. We can talk you through this. But see, that's how easy. They just fit into the holes on the other side. But anyway, here we are. And if you remember, we had to move a spring away from the safety to get the safety out. And here it is. That's this leg of this spring, which wraps around this pin and also actually engages the sear to the hammer right there. It pushes up on this sear. But anyway, let's remove him and do take notice of its orientation. That little hook goes inside and down. Whoop, like that. Now, right here is the trigger itself. And that's what we're replacing. So first thing, oops, I guess it'll come out together. But I'm removing, oh there it is, it fell. The trigger and the pin. right here. There's my pin. Oops, come on you. Okay, magnetism's a wonderful thing. Now if you look, behind the trigger here was this spring. This spring is the one in the kit that we will be replacing. Just take him, the old one, right on out of there. And notice that this is a stiff spring. It's hard to squeeze this spring with your fingers. Okay, now we have these two components left. And this is where I'm going to have to put a warning. I am not going to tell you everything there is to know about how to do an excellent trigger job on here, because if you try what I say and you're not skilled enough to handle it, not experienced enough, you can really screw things up. But I will tell you this. Anywhere that metal touches metal, if you can reduce the amount of friction between those two pieces of metal, you will get a smoother, crisper, just more pleasant trigger. Now, that's all I'm going to say about that. You know, you don't want to screw these things up, but what we're going to do, and this is a good thing to do. I don't make light of this step, but right here, this little engagement surface is what this is what engages and holds back against the hammer. So we're going to take some of our super lube and just get a little bit on here for that surface. Keep it nice and slick, keep the friction low, and that's all you need. Something just like that. Alright. Now if you notice, if you were to look at these, you would see that this piece right here has this leg which touches on the bottom of this piece right here. So we'll put a little bit right there as well. And of course a little bit on the pin wouldn't hurt, so just kind of roll it in your fingers there. Gets a little bit on there. And then put him back in his home right there. Now this piece, oh, I got this one out without taking the pin, but we're going to pull the pin out anyways. But take a notice of what you see there, and you can stop and rewind this video and look at everything so you know where everything goes. But like I said, this surface right here contacts that one here, so that anywhere metal touches metal, or anywhere something moves rubbing against something else, put a little dab of grease there. I'm using silicone grease, and you really probably should only use silicone products on a PCP. So that's all I'm going to recommend to you is silicone. Now, when the trigger sits in here and you pull it, it pushes this hook you see right there down against that part right there. So that's going to get a little lube as well. Even though it was plastic to metal, it's going to be brass to this metal, which is probably some low-grade steel. But we've greased that surface just a little bit. And again on the pin, get a little bit on there. And put him back in his home. No big deal. Okay, now we will take the components of our trigger kit that you buy from us here at Baker. And the first thing we'll do, now I might have done this a little out of order, but we're going to take these two screws, these little tiny screws that come in the kit, and they go in these two holes here and here. They're already provided. You do not need to drill. You do not need to do anything at all, except you don't need to tap them or anything, you know. Just take the screw, Put it on your wrench and then screw it into the rifle. This is plastic. It will make its own threads on its way in here. Now this, for the sake of your sanity, I'll probably speed this up. Okay, here we are. We've got both screws started, and if you notice, the lower one is screwed in way further than the top one. And the reason for that is that it's now time to take the little spring, the new spring from our Baker Airguns kit, and while you have it in your hand, without firing it across the room, squeeze it, and you can feel a big difference between this spring and the old spring. But the new spring goes over that bottom screw, just like that. And now it's time for our new trigger. Now if you remember, this little hook right here touches this little part of this one here, so that's going to get a little dab of the silicone lube. That's it. Just need a little tiny bit. You don't need to overdo it. That's probably way too much anyway. But here we are. And we take our pin, stick the pin in first, and then now we need to get this spring behind this trigger. This is where it goes on the pin. This hole right here goes on the pin. And what we need is for this trigger to go behind this area right here. Now since again this is a place where something touches something, I'm gonna put a little dab of the lube right there. The spring is something, so if it touches, it gets a dab. Now there are many ways you can do this. What I like to do is just take a flathead screwdriver and stick it in front of the spring, and then just use it to pull the spring back. Kind of use this channel as a guide, but you just pull it back enough that you can slide the trigger down over the pin like that. Then you just let it go. Kind of make sure your alignment's good, that the spring's touching back there. Make sure this one's out of the way, this one's out of the way, and there you have it. Now you're doing good, but what we need to do, I see this is a little off kilter, push this up a little bit, there we go. But now what we need to do is take a look at these screws. The one up top here, if you screw this in, it will push the trigger down that way. See this pin? This pin can't move, right? So the whole thing goes like that way, which means it pushes down right here on this lever, which pushes up on this lever, which pushes down on this lever. All right, now what does all that mean? That means this will adjust the pull length, how far you have to pull the trigger before the sear will break. The bottom screw adjusts for over travel. That means when we're done here, when I put the plate on, I'm going to adjust the bottom screw the whole way in until it touches something, and then back it off just the quarter of a turn, maybe a half turn, so that when I'm pulling the trigger, it breaks and then stops. Now we do have to adjust this top one first, because this will dictate where the trigger will be in space. So we must first adjust the top one, then the bottom, and we'll show you that as soon as we're there. Okay, now we need to reinstall this spring, and again, if something touches something, it gets a little dab of the super lube. And that touches something, so it gets a little dab. Again, this back piece, this touches the safety. Now this is probably a little too much, but it doesn't hurt. So now we just sit this with the circle, the big circle, over the trigger pin. Now, of course, it doesn't fit on there, but believe me, that's where it goes. And the other, if you remember, our little hook goes down and behind the upper sear. Just like that. Just like that. And you can also see this is our little channel from earlier. That's where this is going to end up. So make sure that's aligned there and that there. Now we'll put our side plate back on. Just kind of wiggle it so it lines up with the holes and the pins all line up together. And then we can reinsert our 2 screws. Okay, we want these tight, but not too tight. Okay guys, if you look through the hole, see this spring in the safety hole? Now we're putting the safety back in, and this is the small hole. So what we need to do is come in with the small hole, or the small part through the big hole, this way. And if you look at the spring, you just stick your pick in there, grab it, pull it out of the way, and start pushing the safety in simultaneously. And then eventually, oops, you can get it up high enough you can reach it again from that side. And come on, there we go. And then just push it straight through. And now your safety works again. Okay, now back to our screws, our adjustment screws. If you look, I've got this one screwed in pretty far, but now watch the trigger blade. Now make sure the bolt is closed, forward and closed when you do this. Now watch the blade of the trigger right here. See, it's starting to move. See it moving back towards the back of the trigger guard. Now that was about a turn in. I screw this in until the trigger blade starts to move, and then I want a whole turn. Now I'm going to check it to see if it will cock. And it will. Okay, so it will cock. Let's check our trigger pull. It's cocked right now. And let's get out our trusty trigger pull gauge. Start this up again. And see what we've got. £1 pound, 3.4 ounces. Let's try that again. Okay, we are cocked. We are cleared. £1 pound, 3.9 ounces. Okay. Let's give it one more just to check the consistency. And here we are. £1 pound, 8.4 ounces. But I believe I pulled a little hard on that one. But that's because we haven't adjusted our over travel stop screw yet. Now what we do is take our over travel screw and screw it in until it stops, and then back it out about 1/4 of a turn. And that should leave enough room for the trigger to break. If it doesn't, screw it out another 1/4 turn and keep going by 1/4 turns until the trigger will break, but it immediately stops after you've pulled the trigger. I'm going to screw mine in off camera and I'll be right back. Okay, now 1 pound, 5 ounce average is a little light for me. I'd like it to be closer to 3, just under 3 pounds. This is going to be for a customer, so I don't want any accidents or anything. So I've adjusted this until I got close to 3 pounds. And then I adjusted the bottom one. I screwed it in until I see the trigger blade move forward. And that's how I know this is contacting the trigger. And then I back that one out a half turn at a time until I get a nice clean break with a quick stop in the trigger after the sear breaks. Now we want to make sure, like I said, that the gun will cock. First of all, we want to make sure our safety works. And we want to make sure of something called the mallet test. We have to beat on this rifle while it is cocked with the safety off to see if you drop the rifle, will it just fire? So let's do that. Okay, this might be a little hard to get on camera. This rifle is cocked. The safety is off. I'm going to hit it with a mallet to see if it will fire. Okay, it did fire after about 10 or 20 hits. Let's try one hard one. Now this is cumulative. Every time you hit this, you're moving the sear a little. So if you keep beating on it, and then 10, 20 times it fires, it takes that many, I call that safe. If it happens on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is not safe. So make sure you mallet it very well. And make sure that, like I said, everything is working. The bolt will cock and the safety works. Now I'm going to try this trigger with the trigger pull gauge again with the over travel set. And I'm hoping for about 3 pounds, maybe a smidge less. Now obviously, as you saw, you can adjust this lower than that. I'm just choosing not to. But what we want to watch is the travel of the trigger. Let's see how far this trigger travels before it breaks. 2 pounds, 13 ounces. Let's do that again. We need to check for consistency. £2, 11 ounces. Okay, now this is done. In my opinion, this is done. Assembly is the opposite. Now you have to take the safety out before you can put the rifle back together, but you have to put the safety in to test the trigger. So that's going to be a necessary evil. You're going to have to put it in, take it out twice, but you'll get good at it. But there you have it. This trigger has lost, by my will, over 2.5 pounds of pull weight and well over half of its pull length, probably most of its pull length. And like I said, this is adjustable. You can get it down far lower if that's your prerogative and without modifying any of the parts in here. Generally speaking, at Baker Airguns, we do not recommend that you modify, bend, shorten, break any of these components in here. Don't trim coils off the spring. You know, don't mess around with what's in there. If you're going to replace it with a proven, known product and something that has been safety tested. Now, what does that mean? For you, that means that you're getting high quality components to put in your rifle that have been tested by thousands of people who have used this trigger in other applications. So you can rest assured that this will work, and it will work safely. You can adjust it up and down as you see fit. It's fully adjustable, so have at it and enjoy your Fortitude. The rifle has a lot going for it. It just needs one of these triggers and maybe a little tuning. We'll be talking more about that later. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave your questions, comments below. Link, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Hi, I'm Dennis Baker with Baker Airguns. Thanks for stopping by. click the link below.